Whoosh! Several streaks of light shot out from the heavenly river, appearing on a solitary peak outside the river, materializing into figures. It was Mu Chen, Xiao Xiao, Lin Jing, and 9 Nether. At this moment, their position was at the rear of the heavenly river. Looking ahead, there was a hazy world, and within that haze, Mu Chen vaguely felt a faint but oppressive pressure. This pressure seemed not to be from a single source, but no matter where it came from, it made Mu Chen feel a tremendous. Wait, if we go further ahead, we should be entering the 5 halls domain. Mu Chen pointed forward and said to Xiao Xiao and the others. The ancient heavenly palace, aside from the heavenly emperor, was divided into 5 halls and 9 mansions. They had already passed through the 9 mansions, and now they were approaching the 5 halls, which housed the most powerful figures in the palace, second only to the heavenly emperor. Xiao Xiao and the others' expressions subtly tightened at this moment. It was said that the 5 hall masters were the right and left arms of the heavenly emperor, each at the level of perfect Earth Supreme, with formidable strength. It was rumored that these 5 hall masters all had the qualifications to challenge the heavenly supreme. Such figures, if placed in today's great thousand worlds, would undoubtedly be able to become dominant rulers, with widespread renown. These 5 hall masters, the 4th hall master once guarded the northern domain and perished during the invasion of the extraterritorial clan, never to return. As for the other 4 hall masters, they must have fallen within the ancient heavenly palace. Mu Chen said. 9 Nether nodded. If that's the case, then it seems the 4th hall might be easier to explore for treasure. Although the hall masters were all dead, considering their strength, they should have left some means to protect their halls before they died. And these measures would undoubtedly be very troublesome for Mu Chen and his companions. Where is the scripture pavilion? Lin Jing suddenly asked. She was clearly aware of the importance of the scripture pavilion in the ancient heavenly palace. After all, if the heavenly river was the foundation for the growth of the ancient heavenly palace, then the scripture pavilion was its essence. Such an essence could not be ignored, even by their martial realm. Mu Chen shrugged. The map we obtained earlier is pretty much useless by the time we get here. As for the scripture pavilion, there is no information at all. He sighed as he spoke. Deep within the ancient heavenly palace, there were broken spirit arrays everywhere. Some had been destroyed, but others still emitted residual power, drawing on the immense spiritual energy of the palace. Almost all of these spirit arrays were at the master level, so even if they were damaged, one wrong step could lead to disaster. Searching for the scripture pavilion in such a dangerous environment was certainly no easy task. Lin Jing shook her head in understanding, clearly aware of the difficulty. As for the scripture pavilion, I know a little about it, Xiao Xiao said suddenly, breaking their frustration. Oh. Mu Chen and the others immediately turned to her in surprise. Xiao Xiao smiled alluringly, her charm undeniable. She said softly, I heard about it from my father. The scripture pavilion in the ancient heavenly palace is quite unique. It is hidden within the palace, and even inside the palace, very few people are able to enter. Because that scripture pavilion itself is a high-tier sacred artifact. Mu Chen and the others were stunned, their eyes widening. The scripture pavilion was actually a high-tier sacred artifact? This was unbelievable. Mu Chen had never even seen a high-tier sacred artifact. It was important to note that even the 4th hall master, whose star suppression tower was only a mid-tier sacred artifact, would have highly coveted a high-tier one. As for high-tier sacred artifacts, even Earth Supreme experts at the great perfection level would desire them immensely. So, what should we do? If the scripture pavilion is a high-tier sacred artifact, its concealment ability must be extraordinary. We probably won't even be able to find it. And even if we do, it might be impossible to enter, 9 Nether asked. Unable to contain her concern, such powerful sacred artifacts were beyond their level of power. Xiao Xiao smiled. The scripture pavilion itself is not offensive, but its ability to conceal itself is second to none. If it wants to hide, even a heavenly supreme would be unable to find it. Mu Chen and the others' hearts skipped a beat. The scripture pavilion was truly mystical. In a sense, its ability to hide might even surpass that of some heavenly supremes. If it weren't for its lack of offensive capability, it would probably be considered a high-level sacred artifact. If its concealment ability is truly as unimaginable as it seems, then we might not even be able to find it. Mu Chen sighed. It seemed that obtaining the evolution method for the great sun indestructible body wouldn't be easy. Upon hearing this, Xiao Xiao gently shook her head and said, although the scripture pavilion is extremely difficult to find, it's not entirely inaccessible. After all, the Heavenly Emperor placed it within the ancient Heavenly Palace, and it wasn't merely meant for storage. Chen felt relieved, as long as there was a way in. It was fine that he had traveled from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy to the Tianluo continent specifically to obtain the evolution method for the Great Sun indestructible body. All his efforts over the years were for this day, so no matter what, he would not give up. Then how should we find it? Nether asked, gazing at Xiao Xiao with anticipation. Xiao Xiao smiled faintly, her red lips parting as she said, "It's simple, we just need to pass the test of the Scripture Pavilion." The test? Chen and the others were puzzled, then asked, "What kind of test?" Xiao Xiao shook her head. "I don't know what the test is, but I suspect that it started the moment we entered the ancient Heavenly Palace." Chen and the others were once again stunned. The Scripture Pavilion has its own intelligence. So, when we entered the ancient Heavenly Palace, it should have detected us. Perhaps every move we make is under its watchful gaze, Xiao Xiao said, raising her delicate face and staring into the void. Chen and the others felt a chill run down their spines. They glanced around the empty space. While they hadn't felt like they were being watched, hearing Xiao Xiao say this made them uneasy, as if an eye was secretly watching them. Within the ancient Heavenly Palace, occasionally, disciples who show exceptional abilities might suddenly earn the Scripture Pavilion's recognition, directly receiving the chance to enter it, Xiao Xiao said with a smile. So, does that mean we need to show off for it? Lin Jing became more interested and curiously asked. As for what to show off, I'm not quite sure. Those ancient Heavenly Palace disciples who were recognized, some did so through breakthroughs in their cultivation, others had a special insight into a divine ability, or perhaps made a stunning performance in a disciple competition. There are countless ways to impress it. However, it seems that the higher the disciples rank, the more outstanding their performance needs to be. Of course, once they enter the Scripture Pavilion, the privileges they receive are likely to be greater as well. Chen and the others exchanged glances. None of them had expected the Scripture Pavilion of the ancient Heavenly Palace to be so peculiar. Actually, it all comes down to fate. If we're destined, we'll naturally be able to enter the Scripture Pavilion. If not, we might need to call upon a Heavenly Supreme who is proficient in spatial divine abilities to find it for us, Xiao Xiao said, spreading her jade hand. Chen smiled helplessly. He certainly didn't have the ability to summon a Heavenly Supreme skilled in spatial divine abilities. It seemed that the only option for now was to try on their own. Since that's the case, let's not focus on the Scripture Pavilion for now, let's head straight to the 5 halls and see if we can find any other opportunities. Chen decisively set aside his obsession with the Scripture Pavilion, knowing that it wouldn't be easy to access. After all, if the Scripture Pavilion required a performance to recognize them, they couldn't just sit and wait. Xiao Xiao, Lin Jing, and Nether all agreed. No matter what, they couldn't expect to be recognized by the Scripture Pavilion if they did nothing here. Let's go. Seeing this, Chen didn't hesitate any longer. He lightly tapped his toes and shot forward toward the depths of the ancient Heavenly Palace. Behind him, Xiao Xiao and the others followed closely. The 4 of them moved swiftly, occasionally encountering broken spirit arrays along the way, which they avoided under Chen's guidance. After about 10 minutes, Chen began to feel the surrounding ethereal mist growing denser. Under the cover of this mist, even their spiritual energy perception was greatly hindered. There's a spirit array ahead, but there's no danger if I'm not mistaken. It's probably the entrance to the 5 halls, Chen said. Though his spiritual energy perception was obstructed, he still noticed unusual fluctuations ahead and spoke to Xiao Xiao and the others. The 3 women nodded in response. Swish. The 4 of them maintained their speed as they swiftly passed through. And then, they felt as if their bodies had passed through a layer of something akin to a water membrane. Immediately afterward, the space around them became chaotic, as though they had been transported through space. Sensing the chaotic fluctuations in space, Chen was not alarmed. He glanced behind him and saw that Xiao Xiao and the other 2 girls had disappeared, seemingly separated by the distorted space. Chen pondered. The spatial fluctuations around him intensified. Suddenly, light erupted, and countless images began to appear before his eyes. The images depicted towering and majestic halls that a sense of oppressive pressure emanated from these great halls. Almost suffocating, Chen immediately realized that these halls were most likely the 5 halls. Chen focused his attention, closely watching the fleeting images, trying to memorize the scenes in his mind. These images were clearly from within the 5 halls, and if he could find some useful information from them, it would undoubtedly be of great help to him. Chen kept his focus. The images continued to flash by. However, at one particular moment, as a light passed by, Chen's pupils suddenly contracted. It was deep within one of the grand halls. The hall appeared slightly damaged, but its grandeur was still overwhelming. Within the hall, numerous eerie skeletons lay scattered, sending a chill down his spine. However, Chen's gaze didn't linger on these skeletons. Instead, his eyes fixed on the deepest part of the hall, where he saw a dark red jade lotus platform. On this platform stood a flower, about 10 or so meters tall, its appearance strikingly beautiful and dark as ink. Standing still, Chen gazed at the flower, his heart swelling with immense joy. The moment he saw it, he knew. This flower must be the true form of the mandala, the ancient mandala. Deep in the ancient and decaying hall, on the dark red jade lotus platform, a soft glow radiated from the platform, making it seem extraordinary and divine. However, Chen's gaze did not linger on the lotus platform itself, but was fixed on the stunning dark, ink-like flower standing atop it. The flower was roughly 10 meters tall, and on its black petals, ancient runes that seemed to have been carved by the heavens themselves adorned it. Each pattern seemed as though it had been formed in perfect harmony with the world, giving off a sense of completeness. Yet, upon closer inspection, Chen noticed that the flower had a broken branch and missing leaves, creating a subtle flaw that undermined its otherwise perfect appearance. Chen understood immediately. Perhaps when the mandala was severely injured and on the verge of death, it severed its own branches, split its budding form, and sealed its true body. Using its avatar, it escaped from the ancient heavenly palace, preserving its life for the future. Now, it quietly rested on the lotus platform, as if it had fallen into a deep slumber. Still, Chen could sense the terrifying power emanating from the flower, a deep, unfathomable presence that made him inwardly shudder. After a moment of awe, a relieved smile appeared on Chen's handsome face. He hadn't found the scripture pavilion, but instead, he had found the true form of the mandala ahead of schedule. However, Chen's joy was short-lived. He quickly suppressed his emotions and began scanning the decaying hall. Since he had the opportunity to survey the terrain in advance, he knew he must quickly identify all the dangers in the hall. The hall was in ruins, with numerous eerie white bones scattered around, remnants of a fierce battle. It was clear that this place had once experienced a brutal and intense fight. The entire hall was eerily silent, yet Chen instinctively sensed a feeling of danger in the stillness. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. After scanning the area for a while, his gaze finally fixed on a group of stone pillars at the far side of the hall, where several skeletons lay. There were many bones scattered throughout the hall, so these skeletons didn't seem to draw much attention. However, after carefully examining them, Chen realized that the skeletons beneath these stone pillars were not scattered haphazardly. They were seated in a meditative posture beneath the pillars. Although there was no fluctuation in their aura, Chen could still sense a dangerous presence emanating from them. In their positions, they seemed scattered, but there were faint signs of a spiritual array's orientation. So, if Chen wasn't mistaken, these bones might be forming a spiritual array together. This array should be extremely terrifying. Chen's gaze flickered quickly. Previously, Mandala had told him that she had been heavily injured by a sneak attack from Lu Hong. If the latter truly intended to strike, it was clear that he aimed to eradicate her completely. So, the place Mandala had chosen for her self-imposed seal must have some protective ability. If Chen wasn't mistaken, the bones and the spiritual array they formed should be the point where Mandala had placed her hopes. However, this only made him smile bitterly, because while these obstacles protected Mandala's true form, they were also blocking his way. He had no doubt that if he recklessly charged into that ancient hall, the bone guards, which exuded a deadly aura, would not let him pass easily. This is troublesome. Chen fell silent. Based on his estimations, even if he brought Xiao, Linjing, and the others to team up, they wouldn't be able to break into that hall and bring Mandala's true form out. This left Chen feeling a headache. They hadn't even entered the Heavenly Emperor's mausoleum yet, and he couldn't directly teleport Mandala in, as it would trigger a spatial explosion, leading to disastrous consequences for everyone. I need some external powerful assistance to have any chance of success. Chen's eyes narrowed. After a moment of contemplation, a strange light suddenly flickered in his gaze. External powerful assistance. Chen clenched his hand, and an ancient token appeared in his palm. It was none other than the military token from the second Hall Master that he had obtained at the auction. The token of the soul-slaughtering guards, the army belonging to the second Hall Master. Chen looked at the ancient token, and his mind began to stir. According to what Mandala had said, although the soul-slaughtering guards, who had once eradicated numerous Earth Supremes, had all been wiped out, the second Hall Master must have some special means of preserving a few of them in other forms to serve as protectors. If he could use this token to control the soul-slaughtering guards, breaking into that hall and bringing Mandala's true form out would not be an impossible task. Moreover, when Chen thought a little deeper, the trouble he encountered seemed like an opportunity for him to prove himself. An opportunity to show himself to the scripture pavilion. Chen's eyes glinted. The images he saw right now were perfectly timed, revealing the location where Mandala's true form was sealed. It was just too much of a coincidence. Rather than believing it was a coincidence, Chen was more inclined to think that some powerful hand was orchestrating all of this, and that hand might very well belong to the mysterious scripture pavilion. Because the scripture pavilion wanted to see his performance, to see if he could successfully bring Mandala's true form out of this situation. If he succeeded, he might earn their recognition and gain access to the scripture pavilion. Of course, if he failed, he would likely lose both Mandala's true form and the evolutionary method for the Great Sun indestructible body. That consequence would be fatal for Chen. At this thought, Chen's expression grew serious. Without the evolutionary method, his Great Sun indestructible body would be stuck, and he would lose a significant advantage for the future. And if he couldn't bring Mandala's true form back, once this matter was over, the Xia Emperor of the Great Xia dynasty would definitely not spare him. Moreover, with Mandala's current strength as an Upper Earth Supreme, she could only fend off the Xia Emperor. Not to mention, Mandala had a mortal enemy in the Sacred Demon Emperor of the Sacred Demon Palace, Lu Hong. So this time, no matter what, he had to succeed. Chen clenched his hands tightly, his face becoming solemn. He then scanned the ancient hall in the light and shadow before him. This hall should be within the residence of the first Hall Master. Because the pillars were all inscribed with the word, First, go to the residence of the second Hall Master, and with the military token, obtain the remaining soul-slaughtering guards. As Chen's thoughts surged, he suddenly felt the space around him tremble violently. Within a few breaths, the scenery before him changed drastically. What appeared before him was a sky shrouded in mist, beneath which stood a towering mountain that seemed to reach the heavens. At this moment, Chen found himself standing atop this colossal peak. Within the mountain, there were endless, majestic structures, with towering halls rising high, exuding an ancient and overwhelming aura. The entire world seemed to be filled with a sense of time's passage. At the highest point of the mountain, Chen immediately spotted the most magnificent hall. It was a grand hall standing 1,000 feet tall, making anyone who stood before it seem like mere ants. Above the hall, a plaque hung with 3 golden characters inscribed upon it, Second Hall. The plaque glowed with golden light, and it seemed to emanate an immense power, causing the space around it to ripple. So, this is the second hall. Chen gazed at the immense hall and couldn't help but smile. Without hesitation, he swiftly moved forward, turning into a beam of light heading straight for the massive hall. Though his progress seemed rapid, Chen still extended his spiritual energy perception, cautiously scanning the surroundings to avoid accidentally triggering any broken spirit arrays. Fortunately, the journey went smoothly. The spirit arrays that once covered the area seemed to have been completely destroyed in the ancient battle that took place eons ago. Within minutes, Chen arrived before the hall. He carefully examined his surroundings and discovered that the tightly shut bronze doors were sealed. With his current strength, he couldn't force them open. This made Chen furrow his brows in thought. After a brief moment, his gaze fixed on the plaque above the bronze doors. His eyes lit up, and he clenched his hand. The Golden Dragon Disciple token appeared in his palm. The token glowed with golden light, which floated and shot directly into the plaque. As it did, a faint light descended from the plaque, falling onto the closed doors. Creak. The ancient bronze doors, sealed for countless years, finally creaked open, slowly parting. Seeing this, Chen let out a sigh of relief. He tossed the golden dragon disciple token in his hand and couldn't help but marvel at the importance of the identity token in the ancient heavenly palace. Wherever he went, the token was crucial for identifying one's status. As the bronze doors slowly opened, an overwhelming, ancient atmosphere swept out. In that instant, Chen seemed to hear countless sounds of battle, fierce and tragic. When the doors fully opened, Chen snapped back to his senses. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and entered the second hall. Inside the hall, it was vast beyond imagination. However, this once magnificent hall was now in ruins, with cracks everywhere. Evidence of a past battle. But Chen paid no attention to this. The moment he stepped into the hall, his gaze was locked onto the far end of the hall. His eyes widened in shock as he saw a golden throne at the end. Before the throne stood a figure draped in a purple robe. The figure exuded an overwhelming aura, one that seemed to dominate the heavens. The oppressive force was so intense that it sent a chilling sensation through the air, as though even the heavens and earth were trembling before it. The aura was so suffocating that Chen's expression changed drastically. He realized, with horror, that the figure in purple robes was not a mere illusion, but a real physical body. In the second hall, who else could possess such an aura but the second hall master? But what shocked Chen even more was that he could sense a faint lifelike fluctuation emanating from this body. Could it be that the second hall master hadn't perished after all? The figure in the purple robe stood before the golden throne. Its overwhelming aura, warping the surrounding space. The terrifying pressure cascaded in layers, engulfing the entire hall. Chen, now inside the hall, was also enveloped by this terrifying pressure. His body tensed up, golden light swirling around him. Sounds of dragon roars and phoenix cries echoed within his body, making his flesh as strong as steel. Facing this unknown situation, Chen dared not relax in the slightest. These former powerhouses only needed the slightest residual force to make him pay an immense price. As he exerted all his strength to activate the defense, Chen also kept a vigilant eye on the figure in the purple robe. Deep within his gaze, there was a hint of shock, because in that fleeting moment earlier, he clearly sensed that within the body of the second hall master, there was a faint pulse of life energy. Could it be that the second hall master hadn't completely perished, but with such a condition? It certainly didn't seem like there was any remaining consciousness. Chen furrowed his brow, then quickly changed his position, moving to another angle where he could clearly see the front of the second hall master. From here, he could observe the figure in its entirety. Just as Chen got a clear view, his expression changed drastically, and he couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. He saw that the second hall master's face remained set in a decisive expression, with his eyes glaring fiercely, slightly raised, as if looking up at the sky. What shocked Chen was not the frozen look on his face, but the dark blood hole on his forehead. The blood hole was about the size of a finger, seemingly insignificant. However, Chen knew that it was precisely this seemingly small hole that had obliterated all of the second hall master's life force in an instant. How strong is a perfect Earth Supreme? Chen couldn't say for sure, but he knew that in the current Tianluo continent, super powerful beings at the level of a perfect Earth Supreme were few and far between. Yet, such a terrifying existence was wiped out by a single finger. Just how powerful was the person who struck? A chill ran through Chen's skin. He then raised his head to look at the vaulted ceiling of the giant hall. His eyes glowed with spiritual light as he swept his gaze over it, then froze on a specific spot. There, on the ceiling, was another small, dark black hole, about the size of a finger. This hole appeared almost imperceptible on the vast thousand-zhang dome, like the tip of a needle, but when Chen's gaze landed on it, all the hairs on his body stood on end. An indescribable fear surged in his heart. In that instant, Chen seemed to have a vision in his mind. When the extraterritorial clan invaded the Tianluo continent, an unimaginable powerful being descended upon the ancient heavenly palace, and at the moment of his arrival, he casually made a move, even beating the heavenly emperor to it. With just a casual finger, a small black hole appeared on the second hall's dome. Then, as the second hall master suddenly stood up, sensing something, a blood hole appeared in the center of his forehead, and all of his life force was completely destroyed in that instant. One finger to obliterate a perfect Earth Supreme. Chen deeply exhaled. Such terrifying power could only belonged to the Demon Emperor, who, according to rumors, perished alongside the Heavenly Emperor. Who else could possibly possess such strength? Moreover, he managed to act before the Heavenly Emperor. That made him even more terrifying. The extraterritorial clan actually has such an existence, and no wonder they were able to force all living beings in the Great Thousand Worlds to unite back then. Mu Chen's face grew serious, and in his heart, he increasingly felt the terrifying power of the extraterritorial clan. They were indeed the true enemy of the Great Thousand Worlds. Even now, they were probably still eyeing the Great Thousand Worlds, attempting to fully invade and conquer it. Mu Chen pondered for a moment, then quickly suppressed his emotions. For him, the extraterritorial clan was still a bit distant. He was still too weak. Even the Second Hall Master, such a powerful figure, was wiped out with a single finger. Clearly, only by reaching the true Heavenly Supreme level would he be able to stand as a top force on both sides, becoming a powerful bargaining chip for either faction. Suppressing his feelings, Mu Chen's gaze finally shifted away from the Second Hall Master's body and looked in another direction within the giant hall. After all, the most important reason Mu Chen had come to the Second Hall was not because of the Second Hall Master. He was here to find the soul-slaughtering guards. As Mu Chen's gaze swept across the giant hall, he once again became aware of its vastness. Earlier, because the sight of the Second Hall Master's figure had been so overwhelming, Mu Chen had completely overlooked everything else in the hall. At the center of the hall, where the Second Hall Master was a 100-zhang stone staircase leading up to a throne. From the stone staircase, a circular path spread out. Behind it, figures in black heavy armor appeared. When Mu Chen saw those figures, his eyelids twitched uncontrollably, his heartbeat quickened, and his eyes glowed with intense focus. More and more figures clad in black heavy armor appeared in the field of vision. They resembled a silent army, standing behind the Second Hall Master to protect him. Roughly speaking, there were about 5,000 of them, all wearing black heavy armor that concealed their faces. Engraved on the armor were dark red patterns, which looked like blood, faintly emitting a chilling and ominous aura. They also wielded heavy halberds, the tips of which were soaked in blood red, as if surrounded by blood qi. Clearly, when this army was still alive, it must have fought wars everywhere. Even Earth's supreme-level super experts might have been annihilated by them. Mu Chen's gaze was burning as he stared at the heavily armored army holding halberds, his fists clenched in excitement. This army was exactly the soul-slaughtering guards he had been searching for. However, his excitement quickly faded as his spiritual energy perception spread out. To his surprise, he found that among the more than 5,000 soul-slaughtering guards, there was not a single unusual fluctuation that it seemed these soul-slaughtering guards had been completely destroyed. Mu Chen's expression darkened instantly. If he couldn't control the soul-slaughtering guards, it would be impossible for him to retrieve the true form of Mandala from the heavily guarded area. How could this be? Mu Chen frowned. How strong is a perfect Earth Supreme? Mu Chen couldn't say for sure, but he knew that in the current Tianluo continent, super powerful beings at the level of a perfect Earth Supreme were few and far between. Yet, such a terrifying existence was wiped out by a single finger. Just how powerful was the person who struck? A chill ran through Mu Chen's skin. He then raised his head to look at the vaulted ceiling of the giant hall. His eyes glowed with spiritual light as he swept his gaze over it, then froze on a specific spot. There, on the ceiling, was another small, dark black hole, about the size of a finger. This hole appeared almost imperceptible on the vast 1,000-zhang dome, like the tip of a needle, but when Mu Chen's gaze landed on it, all the hairs on his body stood on end. An indescribable fear surged in his heart. In that instant, Mu Chen seemed to have a vision in his mind. When the extraterritorial clan invaded the Tianluo continent, an unimaginable powerful being descended upon the ancient heavenly palace. And at the moment of his arrival, he casually made a move, even beating the Heavenly Emperor to it. With just a casual finger, a small black hole appeared on the Second Hall's dome. Then, as the Second Hall Master suddenly stood up, sensing something, a blood hole appeared in the center of his forehead, and all of his life force was completely destroyed in that instant. One finger to obliterate a perfect Earth Supreme. Mu Chen deeply exhaled, such terrifying power could only belong to the demon emperor, who, according to rumors, perished alongside the heavenly emperor. Who else could possibly possess such strength? Moreover, he managed to act before the heavenly emperor. That made him even more terrifying. The extraterritorial clan actually has such an existence, and no wonder they were able to force all living beings in the Great Thousand Worlds to unite back then. Mu Chen's face grew serious, and in his heart, he increasingly felt the terrifying power of the extraterritorial clan. They were indeed the true enemy of the Great Thousand Worlds. Even now, they were probably still eyeing the Great Thousand Worlds, attempting to fully invade and conquer it. Mu Chen pondered for a moment, then quickly suppressed his emotions. For him, the extraterritorial clan was still a bit distant. He was still too weak. Even the second Hall Master, such a powerful figure, was wiped out with a single finger. Clearly, only by reaching the true Heavenly Supreme level would he be able to stand as a top force on both sides, becoming a powerful bargaining chip for either faction. Suppressing his feelings, Mu Chen's gaze finally shifted away from the second Hall Master's body and looked in another direction within the giant hall. After all, the most important reason Mu Chen had come to the second hall was not because of the second Hall Master. He was here to find the soul-slaughtering guards. As Mu Chen's gaze swept across the giant hall, he once again became aware of its vastness. Earlier, because the sight of the second Hall Master's figure had been so overwhelming, Mu Chen had completely overlooked everything else in the hall. At the center of the hall, where the second Hall Master was a 100-jong stone staircase leading up to a throne. From the stone staircase, a circular path spread out. Behind it, figures in black heavy armor appeared. When Mu Chen saw those figures, his eyelids twitched uncontrollably, his heartbeat quickened, and his eyes glowed with intense focus. More and more figures clad in black heavy armor appeared in the field of vision. They resembled a silent army, standing behind the second Hall Master to protect him. Roughly speaking, there were about 5,000 of them, all wearing black heavy armor that concealed their faces. Engraved on the armor were dark red patterns, which looked like blood, faintly emitting a chilling and ominous aura. They also wielded heavy halberds, the tips of which were soaked in blood red, as if surrounded by blood qi. Clearly, when this army was still alive, it must have fought wars everywhere. Even Earth's supreme-level super experts might have been annihilated by them. Mu Chen's gaze was burning as he stared at the heavily armored army holding halberds, his fists clenched in excitement. This army was exactly the soul-slaughtering guards he had been searching for. However, his excitement quickly faded as his spiritual energy perception spread out. To his surprise, he found that among the more than 5,000 soul-slaughtering guards, there was not a single unusual fluctuation that it seemed these soul-slaughtering guards had been completely destroyed. Mu Chen's expression darkened instantly. If he couldn't control the soul-slaughtering guards, it would be impossible for him to retrieve the true form of Mandala from the heavily guarded area. How could this be? Mu Chen frowned. Even after enduring thousands of years of erosion, the rays of spiritual energy within the array remained clear and bright, emitting a pulse that sent a shiver down his spine. This 9-dragon-slaying immortal array. Even a high-level Earth Supreme would find it impossible to escape if they were trapped inside, Mu Chen muttered, licking his lips. It seemed that the complete 9-dragon-slaying immortal array was in the middle to upper-tier level among master-level spirit arrays. Typically, a mid-tier master-level spirit array would be enough to deal with a high-level Earth Supreme. The position of the second Hall Master was at the center of this array. With his power and the array's assistance, even a fellow Earth Supreme at the Great Perfection level would be suppressed by him if they entered the hall. But unfortunately, when the Demon Emperor arrived, all of this preparation was useless. As Mu Chen marveled at the complete 9-dragon-slaying immortal array, Su Qingyin, standing beside him, stared at him intently and asked nervously, "Well, what do you think?" Mu Chen glanced at her and replied, "What do you mean? What do I think? You don't really think I can break this level of spirit array, do you?" "Of course, it's impossible to break it," Su Qingyin said, not having such delusions. A master-level spirit array like this one would deter even a high-level Earth Supreme from trying to force their way through. However, this spirit array is powerful, but it's uncontrolled, and since you're a spiritual array master, I wanted to ask if you could try to find some flaws and temporarily open it. Only then can we retrieve the phoenix insect. Chen lightly flicked his finger, as if pondering for a moment, before slowly responding, well, it's not entirely impossible. After all, he had some understanding of the 9 dragons slaying immortal array, so if there were flaws, he could try to open a small gap in the array. Really? Su Qingyin's eyes brightened with surprise. She had originally only hoped to give it a try. She had not expected Chen to succeed, considering the array's level seemed to surpass his spiritual array mastery. But Chen's response clearly delighted her. Yes, we can try. Chen nodded. Then, he looked at Su Qingyin with a smile that seemed neither here nor there and asked, but why should I trust you? Even if they managed to get the phoenix insect, could it really restore the soul-slaughtering guards? What if Su Qingyin was lying? If she turned on him after obtaining the phoenix insect, Chen would have done all that work for nothing. Su Qingyin wasn't like Xiao or Linjing, so Chen naturally had some reservations. However, Su Qingyin didn't get angry at his suspicion. She merely smiled and said, my master is from an ancient sect, and in the ancient era, the second hall master's phoenix insect came from our sect, which is why I know this information. Also, I haven't lied. If you want to restore the soul-slaughtering guards, you'll need the phoenix insect's power. To extract the energy stored within it, you'll need my secret technique. Therefore, I believe you have no reason to reject this cooperation. Su Qingyin stared at Chen, and he, in turn, looked at her. Their gazes met, and for a moment, the air seemed to freeze. After a long pause, Chen finally smiled faintly and nodded. All right. As Su Qingyin said, if he truly wanted to revive the soul-slaughtering guards, the only option was to cooperate with her. As for whether anything would change later, they would deal with it when the time came. Then let's cooperate happily, Su Qingyin said with a radiant smile, clearly not worried that Chen would refuse. I need some time, Chen replied without delay, turning towards the spirit array. He then closed his eyes slightly. His fingertips glowing with spiritual light as spirit seals flew out and carefully merged into the complete 9 dragon-slaying immortal array. In fact, based on his understanding and mastery of the 9 dragon-slaying immortal array, opening a gap in this unmanned array wouldn't be too difficult. But clearly, he wasn't foolish enough to expose this fact, revealing his trump card. For no reason was not something cautious Chen would do. I will protect you, Su Qingyin said, stepping back to stand in front of the gate, in case anyone came to disturb Chen while he was breaking the array. As for Chen's slow progress, she had no doubts. After all, this was a master-level spirit array, and if Chen could open it easily, Su Qingyin would actually become suspicious. Su Qingyin sat cross-legged at the bronze gate, her beautiful eyes watching Chen's tall figure standing before the array. She then shifted her gaze to the imposing figure of the second hall master at the center of the giant hall. Phoenix Insect. Her beautiful eyes flickered slightly, then a gentle smile appeared on her face. Her gaze turned fervent. If she could acquire this spirit insect and refine it with the sect's secret techniques, then her path to becoming an Earth Supreme would be almost assured. The giant hall fell silent again, and time quietly passed by. About half an hour later, Chen finally opened his eyes. Su Qingyin quickly stepped forward and asked anxiously, how is it? If Chen failed, then obtaining the phoenix insect would become a fantasy. After all, with her own strength, it was impossible for her to break through this powerful spirit array. Under her nervous gaze, Chen smiled slightly, and then flicked his finger at a ripple of spiritual energy spread out from the massive spirit array, and a gap about half a yard wide slowly tore open. Mission accomplished, Chen said with a smile. Seeing this, Su Qingyin couldn't help but show her joy, her excitement evident as her slightly fuller chest heaved, forming an alluring curve. The gap in the spirit array needs me to maintain, so obtaining the phoenix insect will be up to Miss Su. Chen smiled, and said to Su Qingyin Chen didn't know if there were other traps in the hall, so he clearly wasn't going to take the risk personally. This kind of thing should be left to Su Qingyin. Su Qingyin, of course, understood this. However, she didn't refuse because Chen had already done the most important part. The responsibility of obtaining the phoenix insect was now hers. Then I'll trouble Brother Mu, Su Qingyin said decisively, nodding her head. She then stepped into the 9 dragons, slaying immortal array without hesitation. As she stepped forward, the 9 dragons slaying immortal array seemed to waver slightly, but it did not unleash any destructive attacks. Su Qingyin cautiously moved forward, relieved that she encountered no further incidents once inside the array. In the end, she successfully reached the throne. She gazed at the imposing figure up close, letting out a quiet sigh of relief before her delicate face became serious. Her jade-like hands quickly formed a seal. Suddenly, she bit her tongue, and a mouthful of essence blood was ejected. The blood then solidified, transforming into crimson pills. At the same time, a strange fragrance emanated from them. The fragrance spread, and suddenly, a red spot appeared on the second hall master's forehead. The red spot swiftly moved upward and eventually emerged from his brow, appearing from the black hole. It was a small red light cluster, within which was a blood-red insect, exceptionally enchanting in appearance. The insect had delicate wings, resembling a phoenix, though much smaller, giving it an eerie, otherworldly aura. At this moment, the insect had its eyes tightly shut, curled up as if in a deep sleep. But instinctively, it flew towards the crimson pills, opening its mouth and devouring them one by one. Su Qingyin opened her hand, and the red light cluster fell into her palm. She gazed at the mesmerizing insect in her hand, her face full of excitement. Such a precious phoenix insect, yet it ended up in her hands so easily. Though the phoenix insect was currently in a deep slumber, she could still sense the terrifying energy that was contained within its small body. Su Qingyin took a deep breath, then carefully held the phoenix insect, preparing to turn and leave. "Miss Su, please wait a moment." However, just as she was about to leave the spirit array, Mu Chen's voice came from outside. Su Qingyin looked up, gazing at Mu Chen, and lightly smiled. "Brother Mu, once I exit, I will use a secret technique to extract the energy from the phoenix insect and restore the soul slaughtering guards." As she spoke, her steps didn't falter, and her expression became much more relaxed. With the phoenix insect in hand, even though it was still asleep, as long as she activated a bit of power, no one beneath the Earth Supreme would be able to defeat her. If she had still felt some caution towards Mu Chen before, now, that caution was completely gone. Mu Chen watched Su Qingyin walk with ease and couldn't help but smile helplessly. He then waved his sleeve, and immediately, the gap in the 9 dragons slaying immortal array vanished. At the same time, an overwhelming spiritual energy storm suddenly erupted from the array, and giant dragons formed out of spiritual energy. Their eyes locked onto Su Qingyin with a menacing glare. Su Qingyin's steps came to an abrupt halt. She stared at the spirit array, which had just transformed so drastically, and a look of shock appeared in her beautiful eyes. How can you control this spirit array?" Su Qingyin's expression shifted, and her voice became muffled and incredulous. It was clear she could hardly believe what she was seeing. The scene before her was a clear indication that the 9 dragon-slaying immortal array had been fully activated. Only now did Su Qingyin realize that everything earlier, when Mu Chen seemed to be struggling with the array, had all been an act. In reality, when he opened the gap in the array, he must have already taken control of it without her noticing. But Mu Chen didn't respond to her shock. He simply smiled at her and, with a soft voice, spoke as it echoed in the vast hall. "Miss Su, may I now ask if you can help me restore the soul-slaughtering guards?"